I'm Miles Lambert, and I'm with Rosie, one of the two costume curators who work at Straw Gallery. We launched our new fashion gallery next door in 2022, just under 2 years ago. Until 2017, some of you will know that the costume was exhibited at Platt Hall in Rusholme, and we closed that in 2017, and it's now being sort of re-envisaged as a gallery in a park. So this is our public face now. We're finding it really exciting actually because we are part of the rest of the collection of the art gallery, the Decade of Art Fine Art, and it's really nice to be part of it and not slightly out in a suburb. We also get about 750,000 visitors here, and we used to get about 20,000 at Platt, so that's a win-win situation, I think. Our latest show, our second show in the gallery, is called Unpicking Couture. And it was created in partnership with the University of the Arts London and partly funded by the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council. The research project, called Exhibiting Fashion, aimed to develop a toolkit to equip non-specialist curators in smaller museums to create innovative fashion displays on a small budget. Our exhibition in there features many pieces which we acquired from 2015 to 2019 through a Collecting Cultures grant from the National Heritage Lottery Fund, and a few key garments from our own collection. The displays present a contemporary interpretation of couture clothing, exploring design codes, sustainability and wear, courage and creativity, identity and self-expression. We have tried to include multiple perspectives and encourage narratives through collaborations and by featuring a range of non-curatorial voices. We are most grateful to have worked with various partners, including Stitched Up, Zenzi Tinker Conservation, the National Saturday Club, Jackie Haynes, Cheddar Gorgeous, and of course the Manchester Fashion Institute. In the future, we will try to create inclusive exhibitions and exploratory spaces that facilitate ways to connect and learn. As part of this today, we want to thank Gavin Douglas for initiating this programme of 3 panel talks, exploring the intersection of fashion with disability, race, and today, sexuality and gender. These events can support young people starting out in their careers by encouraging them to be ambitious and informed, and we want our gallery spaces to support this. Finally, we have recently installed a new film in Unpicking Couture, featuring Manchester Fashion Institute final year BA Fashion Design and Technology students. So please make sure to take a look. The students created work in response to the themes and garments on display and explored their view of the future of fashion. Many congratulations to Amani Ahmed, Liam Richardson, Jessie Tan, and Sophia Bruckner, who feature in this film, and who talk about their inspiration, process, and vision. I'd now like to pass over to Gavin. Sorry, it's not you. Sorry. Whoever you are.
Nathan, sorry.
Nathan, sorry.
I'm just going to read an opening statement. The statement is to kind of give a bit of context around what today's panel talk is specifically about and the themes in which we're discussing today. Hopefully, we'll give some to this conversation here today, but also maybe for yourselves and to further understand what we are doing today. So, the intersection of fashion, sexuality, and gender has long been fertile ground for cultural exploration and societal change. In contemporary discourse, these elements are more interconnected than ever, challenging traditional norms and redefining identity. Fashion, once seen primarily as a mode of self-expression, now serves as a powerful tool for articulating and negotiating gender and sexual identities. This discussion aims to delve into how fashion not only reflects, but also shapes our understanding of sexuality and gender, exploring the dynamics of inclusion and representation. We also discuss resistance within this vibrant intersection. By examining the evolving narratives and practices, we seek to uncover a profound impact of fashion on the ongoing dialogue surrounding identity and empowerment. This intersection of fashion, sexuality, and gender has long been fertile ground for cultural exploration and societal change. This panel discussion will delve deeply into how fashion not only reflects but also actively shapes our understanding of sexuality and gender. It will explore the dynamics of inclusion, representation and resistance within this vibrant intersection, considering how fashion can both uphold and disrupt those societal expectations. From runway to the streets, from high fashion to everyday wear, the choices we make about what we wear can speak volumes of who we are, who we stand for, what we stand for, and how we see ourselves within this world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Miles, as well. And welcome to everyone today. I'm really excited to do this panel today. We've got a fantastic panel in front of us. They've given me the permission to ask absolutely anything. Well, I'll let you off, Daniel, but Darren and Daniel have given me the permission and authority to delve deep. Do bear that in mind, audience, if you have any questions at the end. I hope that extends to you as well. But if you do have any questions, do please take notes. There will be an opportunity just towards the end to ask any of the panelists any questions that you may have from the conversations that we have. I'm going to just start by, thanking you all for coming, and you all have very busy schedules. So thank you all for making the time to attend and be a part of this. Thank you to Manchester Art Gallery as well for giving us the space and the opportunity to let our voices be heard, and also to Manchester Fashion Institute as well for also supporting the event and enabling us to, take part and have this with the gallery. And thanks to everyone for also taking time out to be here and join us today. In saying that, I'm going to make a start. So what I'd like everyone to do, I'll start with Caryn towards the end. It's just by, what I usually do is kind of read a short bio, but I think it'd be more interactive just to hear from you in terms of what your experiences have been like, what your experiences have been and are like in the industry, and what's brought you to this point today, particularly with surrounding your interest with regards to sexuality and gender, and why you felt it was important to be a part of this panel.
Thanks, Gavin, and that's all in, 90 seconds?
You've got 2 minutes. When I start blinking, it's time to wrap up.
Thanks very much, everyone. Lovely to be here to think about these things, because when you're in a panel, you start to think, okay, so which bit's going to be important today? So I would say, from my 42 years of working in and around fashion, beginning on a street style magazine, ID magazine, and working there for 6 years, and engaging with everyday identities, but a sort of diverse group of humans, shaped my entire career. And when I moved into commercial fashion and began to question the unachievable body ideals, the lack of a variety of a display of humans, I began to see how sterile our fashion industry was. So that's always been something that I've wanted to challenge, and just to cut things short, probably have done for the last 40 odd years. Over to you, Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel Lismore. I'm an artist, and I've worked in the fashion industry for 22 years. It kind of weirdly started as a model, and back then you couldn't talk about sexuality yet. You couldn't speak about gender, sexuality, anything. It was very cutthroat, horrible, a bit Me Too. And so I've been working in the industry for a long time in the art, fashion, entertainment world, and I've seen so much change, positive change, also lots of negative change. And I love to look back through history and look at the great people through history, like Chevalier Dion and Mal Fripp, and all these incredible people that were style change makers of their time, way before we have had any of these ideas of what gender is like today. Like, these people existed a long time ago, and we're all going, oh, this is not real. And I'm like, well, these people have been around forever and part of humanity. And then me living as sculpture, I don't really think about sexuality or gender when it comes to my work, believe it or not. But it's just part of, I just see myself as a human being. So that's where I come from on this.
Hi. I actually forgot my name then. It was literally, who am I? Hi, I'm Daniel Peters. I'm the founder of a diversity and inclusion consultancy called the Fashion Minority Report, but I've worked in fashion equally, two of the fellow panelists here for a while, you could say. And for me, having worked in the industry across different brands and businesses, I guess I've seen the changes that have been happening. There's still a lot of change that needs to happen. But for me, I guess the key thing is that fashion has transformative powers. Fashion unlocks something within so many of us that allows us to express who we are on a daily basis. It's how we choose to present ourselves to each other. But often there can be a lot of conversation around how we should conform and how we should dress. Am I allowed to swear? Yeah, right. I'll try not to swear. But it's BS. Like, anybody and everybody should be able to exist in their true self, in their true sense of self, and in their true identity. And we shouldn't be placing limitations on people when it comes to sexuality and gender in an industry that talks about creativity. Creativity is putting together a part of yourself on a daily basis. That is how I look, how I dress. And I think, again, it's about how do we remove those barriers, continue to remove them, and make sure that we can all be as expressive as we want to be through our clothing.
My name's Darren Pritchard. I'm a native Mancunian, and I've been working in the fashion industry from today. So thank you, Gavin, for my first paycheck from the fashion industry. No, I'm a creative in Manchester, and I run a few creative arts companies here, and fashion and music and dance. It's really hard to see fashion as a silo because it's affected by so many other things, such as your culture and where you're from and where you want to be and what you dream and what you aspire to be. People use that to express themselves the same way as people do within the arts. So I'm here to talk about that, and a lot of mine will be to do with sexuality and gender, because 99% of my work is with the QTIPOC community, which is another acronym of queer, trans, intersex, bi, people of colour. So the POC community that I work with also feel other from the queer community. That's why we've got our own acronym, and it's got cute in the title, which is nice.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, everyone, for those introductions. I think you've all been a bit modest, so I'm going to come back to you all, because I've done my research and I've got my notes. So you've all been quite modest in terms of your overview and your careers and what you've achieved. I'm going to start with you again.
Gavin, we only had 2 minutes.
No. I'm going to give you a little bit more now. I'm going to come back to you, Caryn. So your official title, Caryn Franklin MBE. I'm aware you've also got 2 honorary doctorates. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, part of that is some of the amazing work that you've done within the fashion industry, particularly with regards to projects that you've worked on with supporting international design talent. You've also done work with the refugees in battle zones, workers in free trade zone slums, and worked around mental health and supporting and promoting positive body imagery. Can you just give us a little bit of information about that with regards to your interest and works that you've done within that area?
Well, all I'd really say, to put it back out to the audience, is that you let your own agenda guide you. So for me, I love human beings. I love to see them living their best life. And I know the power that clothing has to act as a comfort blanket or armour. But we've all alluded to dominant culture and the rules and the way that we have to conform. And I joined an industry where, when I began, I didn't have to conform, and I saw no reason why I needed to continue to conform. So I've worked with a huge variety of people. For instance, one lady who had a record of perhaps the worst childhood trauma. I consulted with her psychiatrist and her therapist to help her choose clothes that acted as both comfort blanket and armour, so that she could put on something and step out and feel that the world saw her not as a broken human being who was in recovery, but as just one of them. So I'm forever converted from those kinds of experiences.
Excellent, thank you for that, Caryn. Just moving on to you, Daniel. So I'm aware by Daniel Lismore, just by my own research as well, you've worked with some incredible photographers, Stephen Klein, David LaChapelle, to name just 2. Vogue has also named you as, or listed you as England's most eccentric dresser.
Not guilty.
Not guilty. You've also delivered a TED Talk as well. During COVID, you focused predominantly on LGBTQ activism, new artworks, with you focusing around new artworks, including an exhibit, I believe, called Be Yourself, Everyone Is Already Taken, which was showcased in Coventry. So if you just pick one of those incredible points that you've achieved over a few years, just tell us a little bit more, in a bit more detail about that.
Well, I think the activism, I don't really talk about it too much, but I'm a bit of a stealth activist, and I get myself into trouble until everyone realises that I've done something not as bad as they thought I'd done. But sometimes you have to speak to the opposition of your existence to be able to achieve anything, and I'm quite good at that. I'm quite good at sitting in a room with a bigot and getting them to take a selfie with me on the way out. So, but through lockdown, it was a really interesting situation. There was an app called Clubhouse, and it was the first time the LGBTQIA+ community had ever spoken to each other globally. We were speaking to people in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Sierra Leone, literally places that we'd never ever even dream of trying to have contact with. So I formed a community, and lots of things have come from that. But it's interesting how I've, through my journey, I'm very fortunate. I've travelled the world and I've met all kinds of people. I've been to all corners of the globe, places where I'm illegal, places I shouldn't go, but sometimes do some good there if I can. And I've learned that people, our species is so diverse. There's over 40 variations of intersex people, which people don't even know about, and then they say, and I've worked, there's a great study that's just come out about gender and the brain, and it's done by a biologist who focuses mainly on biology in the brain, and has more or less come up with why people are trans, which it's not out yet, but when it comes out, it'll be a revelation because it's actually based on biology. So there's all these arguments around the world. I mean, just look around the room. Everyone's so different, right? Our species is so different, yet we're all the same. And it's just based on hatred and bigotry, and same in our industries. But I think things are changing. I work with Bulgari, who they pay me in gold, which is amazing. So I got an email going, well, do you want to be a Bulgari ambassador? And I'm just like, wow, this is a revelation. I did an H&M campaign called Close the Loop, and it was before I found out about all the terrible things that I've done. But it was the first time the campaign went viral. It was in all the giant screens around the world. And it was the first time they'd ever really done a diverse campaign, like a main high street thing. And I did it because it was based on recycling. So I'm an advocate of trying to save the world. Our industry is so destructive, yet our LGBTQIA+ people are on the bottom of the pile when it comes to human rights. So when the world starts to fall apart, we're gonna, so I'm doing my best, and that's just a bit of that background.
Excellent, just a few things. Excellent, thank you, Daniel. Moving on to Daniel Peters.
Thanks.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the Minority Report group that you've established. You've worked with some huge global fashion brands, including, don't try and get embarrassed, Daniel, including Hugo Boss, ASOS, Jim Stark, Tapestry, generally supporting them to understand their DE and I strategies, helping them to develop and work with minoritized groups. You were also part of the BFC, British Fashion Council Diversity and Inclusion Steering Committee, and you're also doing some work with us at Manchester Fashion Institute as well, just with regards to where we are with regards to, I always call it our open doors, opening corridors, so just ensuring that there's an equitable experience for all students, regardless of their lived experiences or backgrounds. I'm really intrigued to hear more about the recent report that you've written in collaboration with the British Fashion Council. Can you tell us a little bit about that, why it was important and what led you up to that report?
Sure, that wasn't a question that you'd sent to me, but all right.
Well, I did say that, it's natural for
All right. And to be fair, like, I don't like hearing things back about myself because it always feels a bit arrogant.
That's why I've said it for you.
Thank you so much. I love what I get to do because for me, coming from, in my background, I started off at Burberry at the age of 19, producing the showrooms and producing the runway shows and the global events. I don't say that to be big-headed, but at that age, I didn't even think I could get into the industry. Coming from a single-parent working-class background in an area of London called Peckham, I didn't know those opportunities were open to me. Nor did I ever think that I could be an entrepreneur, which is a word that I probably learned to pronounce about a year ago. But the work that we do is all about transformation from the inside out. And I think for the industry, we've never really taken a proper internal look at who really works within the four walls of all of our businesses. We can often speak to the fact that there's a diverse spectrum of people, but we need the data. And data is really at the forefront or the grounding of understanding what's happening. But outside of understanding the numbers and the statistics of people, it's about understanding actually everybody's lived experience as much as they want to share. And so partnering with the British Fashion Council, an organisation called The Outsider's Perspective, but also McKinsey, it was the first of its kind, and it feels fulfilling to be able to say that. And we put out a survey to the UK fashion industry to collate information about, as I say, who works in the industry and how they feel about how things are progressing. The data wasn't necessarily shocking, if I'm really honest. I'm a black gay man. Like, the intersectionality is already here. I already understand the problems that I face, and I hear it from so many other people. But the reality is that so many people who sit within senior leadership positions, i.e. CEOs and different C-suite, they need to sometimes see the facts on paper as to what the damn problem is. They shouldn't have to. They should be able to look around their office and talk to people. But we needed to articulate that actually, these are the stats, this is how it's looking, this is how people feel, and actually, here's the case and the reasoning for why you need to be able to do something. We can't continue to sit on our hands when it comes to DE&I. And for me, DE&I, obviously we're talking about gender and sexuality today, but it extends to so many parts of our identity, from age to ethnicity, to whether you're a parent or carer, also, whether you've got a disability as a person. And again, we neglect so many different communities, but we want people's coins. That's the reality. But if we want that money, actually, let's make sure that our workforce is diverse. Let's make sure that our workforces are representative of the people who exist outside. You're going to try and take from the culture, actually have those people in the rooms that they can make an informed decision. You're looking at me and blinking, I'll stop talking now.
No.
Oh, okay. But the reality is that, I liken what we're going through now with diversity, equity, and inclusion to what happened in Rana Plaza or sustainability. We're never going to get to a point in a short amount of time to be creative, to see the change we exactly want to see now. It's going to take a while, but the change is happening. And actually there are businesses and people and brands who are starting to realize that actually there are people that we need to bring in and actually to inform what we're doing so that it's truly reflective and representative.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. And Darren, a native Mancunian, which you mentioned earlier, you've had a very successful career, directing, producing, choreographing over a period of 23 years. You're the founder of Ghetto Fabulous, which is also Manchester-based. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that as well. And you also work with Black Gold Arts, and predominantly around queer people of colour, working in Manchester Gay Pride and also the QTIPOC community within Manchester, as well as hosting UK's only queer people of colour outdoor festival. So there's a lot of that you've done and achieved over the years. You've predominantly focused on black and brown experiences, queer experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience, what made you get into that, what you've experienced, and why you felt it was important for you to represent the community?
I always say that I'm a representation of myself in that community, not the community, because it's not a monolith and everyone's not the same. And the reason why I did what I did was I had a very good career and I just got bored of being the only one like me, with my kind of accent in the room, who looks like me, with my culture and my background. So I always say my art is my activism, what I produce. You'll never see me pop off on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. I will be like, okay, how can I elevate the black and brown human experience at this time? And like with Black Pride, I just thought, I'll do a Black Pride in Manchester. It's expensive to get to London. We'll do that. It became the biggest one outside of London. And then it was like, how do we take the outside spaces, because we're always inside. We're either in a club or we're in a theatre. So I then became co-founder of Black Gold Arts, which is Europe's only outside festival. And we kind of took up that space again, platforming black and brown artists. And it's the same with Ghetto Fabulous, because we've like travelled internationally and we toured and we've danced with probably every DJ. Our CV is very, very extensive. And again, that was just for a need of me going, I'm a Mancunian, so I don't like to run off my mouth. I like to kind of put the action behind what I'm doing. And it's a Caribbean in me as well. It's like actions do speak louder than words. And it was an industry. If you can't hear, you must feel. So you're going to feel the power and the passion and our voices throughout our work and what we do. And that's why we've been so successful and amenable, and because we've just, I'm a doer, that's why I call myself a creative producer more than a director, because I just like to do stuff, and it has been really powerful. And because in Manchester, when we did the first Black Pride, my friend said to me, it would be amazing if that this was a majority of queer black people in the audience, because it wasn't the first time. I was like, no, there's not that many. Now, I'm hiring over 50, 60 people, and in the industry as well, where the first thing that people say is the talent's not there, the people aren't there, and it's always the first go-to. And I'll be like, I'll share my Excel sheet. I've got fashion designers, makeup artists, hairstylists, and some even very established, especially in queer black community. You're always at square one. You could have the most extensive CV, you're never where your white counterpart will be. And that's just real talk. It's like, probably stats are there that we're always on a back foot. So I just did it to do that. And I also, the platforms that I do are very big. So it's like we've got the show at MF, which is the biggest queer black show. Black Pride, the only one, the big. So I'm like, as a community, it's great us doing our grassroots community stuff, and it's great, but we can take the spaces of those CEOs, of those big dance jobs, those big fashion jobs, and sometimes we don't even need their platform to do it now, because the world is changing. It's 2024, we can create our own, have our own voices, have our own stories, and curate it in the way, and representation matters. So I just try and get myself to be represented out there, but also 60 other people that are black and brown.
That's a great response. Thanks for that, Darren. There's, when we're talking about gay pride, we clearly have London, we have pride in London, there's pride in Birmingham, there's already a pride in Manchester. This might seem an obvious question to you, but why is it important to have a pride for black and brown people? What's the importance? What's the point?
Yeah, when we say pride, people always go, oh, black pride, anti-white. No, it's not. It's when you're from a demographic that is trod upon, is appropriated, is not given its flowers, you need the platform and you need to have the pride in yourself and with your community to be able to share with others, this is what we do. Because people are always like, well, what's Black Pride if you've got these and they should all be integrated? There's racism everywhere. And what Black Pride in Manchester really did and I did was I really looked at the POC-ness of it. So it's called Black Pride, but we have a load of South Asian people. We have a load of Southeast Asian people. And just seeing them on the stage mattered, because from Black Pride came the Queer Asian takeover of Manchester Pride, because the house that watched that then set up that. And then another girl set up a queer cabaret because she's seen 5 Asian drag queens and not just one at this event. So it's important for us to be there and be seen, because our voices are always taken for us. And the queer Black experience and the queer POC experience is constantly one of take. And I'm there to go with a blueprint of a lot of stuff. And if you talk about the fashion industry, it's like there's always a Black, gay, trans, non-binary in the background. We create the style, we create the looks, we wear clothes slightly different, the way we remix music is slightly different, and then that gets appropriated, taken away from us. And this goes back, those platforms go back to the source and go, if you want the authentic recipe of where this comes from, these are the people that do it. And mainly it's about representation.
And I think it's also touching on, or is about, intersectionality as well. And I'm going to come back to that point a little bit later, because I've got another question for you as well. Daniel Lismore, you kind of mentioned about 40 variations of intersex people, the kind of sexuality and gender transforming over the years. So this is a question for both you and also Caryn. With the changes and developments within society over the 20th and 21st century surrounding sexuality, identity and gender, do you think that has contributed to kind of the developments with global couture and fashion? Has the way that people identified with their sexuality and gender impacted fashion, particularly within high-end fashion and couture, in any way?
Thank you, Gavin. But I just also want to say it's so lovely to feel the passion and the authenticity on the panel. And that's, I think, a big part of what makes fashion powerful, is when people bring their agendas to something, to engage with how we show up, how we present. So I really enjoyed that. I also love it, to your question, Gavin, when fashion can actually offer something that helps us see ourselves in perhaps a different way. So I put a few pictures together to showcase something that I'm really enjoying, is just the loosening up of gender boundaries. Women have always had agency to move into masculine territory for dress, and it's been hard won. Historically, it was prevented. They were heckled in the street if they wore men's trousers. Aided by the invention of the bicycle, women could then wear the split skirt. And slowly but surely, we acquired for ourselves the space to step into perhaps what was perceived as a hard boundary for gender. Men haven't had that freedom because of gender ranking, because being seen as identifying with your feminine is lesser somehow. So men have always been given a really dull offer by fashion, sort of norm-core, authoritative, traditional looks. So I'm loving now that colour and fluid movement in clothing. These are Issey Miyake's spring, summer. Sensuality, we're seeing that in menswear as well. And I'm also loving, this is Rick Owens, that shapes can be distorted, that identities can be presented in a different way. So for me, that's really, really exciting. And I actually feel that it's this loosening up that benefits our menfolk, because what we understand from studies is that from birth, men have to suppress a whole authentic part of themselves to conform to dominant culture's expectation for masculinity. Women get put down later on, but men actually get almost removed, experience a severance from their own emotions, so are discouraged from anything that is seen to be a weakness or is seen to align with a kind of feminine sensibility. So our small boys are expected not to feel pain in the same way that girls are allowed to feel it, not to feel fear in the same way, not to feel anxiety or vulnerability. So this shuts down part of ourselves. and goes some way to explaining why we have the disassociated leadership that we have, because capitalism respects a warrior mentality that is fixed only on winning the battle, is fixed only on quarterly profit returns, is not fixed on empathy and nurturing. And that is something that we're all excited about, as Daniel's stats are showing and as other studies are showing. We can begin to see the value of that in the workplace.
It's really interesting that you're talking about those kind of situations, because later on in life, people that go through all of that, like I'm just talking about men, and I'm sorry, this is like, I don't want it to look toxic at all. People like me that look a bit feminine sometimes have to deal with that, and I'm talking about sexuality. Like, I haven't dated a gay man for 15 years, only straight men, and a lot of them come to me and just happen to have these insane conversations which are not even our community don't really talk about it. And it's fascinating how I'm hearing like these stories of these suppressed people who like really are someone else and they just pretended their whole lives, and I'm like, wow, it's so fascinating. No one even talks about it. I've never heard it on a panel discussion, or never heard it on the television. I've never heard it in a book or on social media. It's just like, well, so that's my reality. That's my everyday like dating life, which is, I don't know, I need to figure that out. But I don't know. It's like what you said. If you look into our industry, who made these clothes? Like I've been in the Middle East. I've been around places, and everyone's dressing like funky, cool, whatever. If they saw a gay designer that had designed something, they'd be like, there's sometimes a bit of bias there, I'm not saying everybody. If they actually realised what they were wearing, we were wearing this stuff in the clubs, like literally, I remember New Rave. We started that whole scene and New Grave, and then everything that came from that, and seeing like all these nightclubs and like the queer community, there are these incredible people, the designers went and stole all the looks and put them on the runway, and even Alexander McQueen and loads of other people kind of took our looks from the club, put them on Lady Gaga, put them on whatever. You see them on Katy Perry and Nicki Minaj and all these other people. And it all came from a group of like wonderful queer people who have been ousted by society, yet years later are wearing, like, people on their yachts and whatever or might be a bit homophobic, are going, oh, look what I've got on their Instagram. And you're like, whoa, okay. So it's interesting that, yeah.
I think you both alluded to the point, and Caryn, you mentioned the term loosening up of men, and you're speaking about how kind of the appropriation really of taking from the queer culture, putting it on the catwalks and not necessarily recognising where that inspiration has come from. Do you think or not this has kind of supported that loosening up within society? So seeing these more kind of creative, avant-garde and artistic, queer garments on the catwalk has enabled society to deem and kind of consider that type of clothing more wearable by men, maybe?
Oh, look at me.
Just to anyone. So
well, I just think there's quite often fashion is a barometer for what's happening. So we've now got an opportunity where we can express ourselves and self-publish, which we never had before. And so people are talking about their reality. We've also got access to a wealth of social science study that shows us that suppressing authentic emotion for any human being impacts their mental health. But just bringing it back to dominant culture and the expectation upon men to kill off part of themselves. I think there's a brilliant quote by Bell Hooks who says the first violence that patriarchy does is not to women, it's to men, where it asks them to psychically sever from their emotions. And if they don't, they can always rely on a pack of effectively marauding dominant culture types to punish them for not doing that. And that's what happens in the workplace. That wasn't the answer to your question.
No, it was. You answered that perfectly. Thanks for that, Caryn. I'm going to kind of, carry us over to Darren Peters now, just with regards to kind of barriers and challenges that happen based around people trying to fit in, I think is what we're moving into now. So like what society deems as masculine, what society deems as feminine. Do you think like societal norms have an impact on the way that people dress and the choices that they make within the choices of fashion and clothing?
So I think we're expected to conform quite often in the workplace, but there's also a reality to me that musicians and TV characters wear what we kind of end up considering to be avant-garde these days, even though it's just normal clothing, standard clothes. But I think it's empowering particular people to feel a sense of self. I think we've seen other artists like Lady Gaga, as you mentioned, who, I think she cultivated this community of monsters who felt more liberated to walk the streets as themselves. I think the problem that we have is that quite often society we always want to put people in a box, is the problem. No matter who you are, there's always a box that we need to occupy. And I think that we then see people walking down the street dressed as their authentic selves, and we're immediately intimidated. But what are we intimidated by? Like, are we intimidated by the fact that we can't feel that sense of liberation? I think that's really it. Like, anybody, as I was saying earlier, should be able to put on a sense of clothing that they feel connected to. Like, me walking out the streets of Peckham sometimes, I have to rein it in. Like, I'm dressed like a standard straight guy today. No offense to straight people. But I'm wearing the playbook of straight man colours, blue, black, and beige. But, at the same time, I've got friends who call some of my shirts funky, but they're funky because they're colourful. I use colour to express who I am. I use little kind of accoutrements to kind of have flourishes and touches, and I think that's great. But there is also this sense of needing to minimize ourselves because we don't want to sometimes go against the grain. So I think there's this push and pull that we kind of have in place.
So how do you think that society can support the kind of dismantling of these stereotypes of gender roles and sexuality?
Again, I'm going to go back to TV. Like, TV, books, and film, I think, carry so much power. I often speak about the TV show I May Destroy You. For me, that felt like the first time I saw myself and a lot of my friends, but me in particular as a black gay man, represented on TV, on mainstream TV. People who carry themselves similarly to myself, who have hairstyles like this. I remember when I had my hair like this the first time, years ago, the black boys in the hood were like, "What are you doing? Are you okay?" Like, it's not like the time I had my hair straight. Like, I relaxed my hair at one point. Like, that was a moment. But, I think it's one of those things where sometimes we can't expect so much of society all at once. But I think through different types of programming and different types of conversations that we can have, actually we can create this space where people are able to see points of difference. And again, I think through TV, it's a medium that we all connect with. We all watch TV, we all watch films. And I think actually we are often subject through that medium in terms of being able to see different types of people these days, because the programmers, the producers, the executives are more so investing in different types of storytelling. And I think that in itself is a good medium. We don't necessarily need people to be reading a newspaper or always a book or something of that nature, but and I feel like a cop-out for saying it, but it's a way of easing people into the conversation. Because actually so often I think you can feel like you've got to thrust something at somebody for it to stick, but actually that makes people jump back, no matter what the conversation is. But I think when it comes to fashion and how we break down the norms around sexuality and gender when it comes to clothing and so on, we're seeing it, like guys wearing crop tops and so on and so forth. And I think it's allowing that playfulness through storytelling.
Thank you. Darren, we spoke earlier about the Black Gay Pride. We spoke about the reasons why it's necessary to have that. So kind of a community within a community having an event to ensure that they feel a part of their own community and that they have a safe place to celebrate themselves. Why do you think it's important to have these safe spaces to enable individuals to express their individual genders or sexualities and identities?
Because we're not at a place where everybody's accepting of who you are, so we need those safe spaces where we can have those frank conversations with ourselves and each other. We're not there yet. I always say, like, Black Pride is the event I don't want to be doing in 2024. I would love this kind of Benetton world where we're all kind of accepting in different colours, and a fashion reference there, to come together and this kind of like utopia, but we're not there. I'm a big believer in people having their spaces. Like when I had all the females, there was a woman who was like, Darren, I want the girls, but I can't have you. And I was like, and she's kind of got, and I said, I understand. I was like, this is a women-only space, trans women and cis women space. I said, I understand that. And we went into conversations about why, and then we got talking about the patriarchy, and she's like, well, some of those women have been abused at the hands of men. Some of them, this is the only place that they can come to for that space. And that, so I think these safe spaces are important for us just to have frank conversations and also meet people that go through the same experiences as you, because sometimes you can feel like the only one. And when these safe spaces are created and you find people that look like you, sound like you, and have the same cultural experience as you, there's nothing more empowering than going, I am not on my own in this. And hopefully people have kind of like care and compassion within that. So I think that's why these spaces are important.
Excellent, thank you. So Daniel Lismore, this question is to you. What contribution do you think the LGBTQ plus community have made to the global couture luxury fashion industry? So what contribution have they made? And who would you say your standout fashion designers and contributors are?
I mean, mainly they are that industry. They are the industry. Like, there are other people that work in it, but I think a lot of the people in that industry, they've had a vision and a fantasy, and they're living it, and they're creating for the rest of the world. That's what I was saying earlier. It's kind of fascinating when you get behind the scenes, who's doing what, whatever. It's also it's kind of nice because I'm very lucky to be in that world. Like even the haute couture industry, which is very hard to get into. There are a few like rich straight men that kind of pay for everything, but it's I mean, it's just a fascinating world. We all support each other, so it's kind of nice. But there's lots of amazing women in the industry who kind of like lead it with the queer people, and that's how I see it. So.
And who would you say are the standout designers and contributors, LGBTQ plus, with regards to global fashion?
I mean, obviously there's John Galliano, who I love, and I mean, or most of them. I don't know this. I don't know. I mean, there's
John Galliano, yeah.
I love all these like young creatives. The haute couture industry is very hard to get into, and I was very lucky to, when I had my label years ago, Soropol, they actually opened up to us, and they wouldn't talk to my business partner, but they would talk to me, and we got in there, and it was nice to kind of be accepted into that, but I realised how hard it was, and I guess this kind of, they were like magpies, I guess, but these young designers showing at Couture Week and whatever, I think they're really great, and they're really kind of on it. So it's changed a lot. The doors are opening to different people. So
You're next. So you can answer something, yes.
I can wait, but I was just going to say, I think it's interesting because I agree with you with everything there. I think the problem is, though, that there's still not enough intersectionality when it comes to the design industry itself, because actually quite often, even if it is an LGBT person, they're often white. Nothing against the white community, of course, but I remember seeing when Sean McGurr was appointed to the position of creative director at Alexander McQueen. But when you then took a further step back and looked at all of the creative directors across all of the houses, that is it, Caryn? Yeah. Caryn, they're all white men. Like, What? Were there no like Indian or black people? Like, was there not an Asian woman? Was there not somebody what is it?
So
Because
what do you think needs to happen to enable that to happen?
I think it's
That change?
I think it's like I've already said, it's about having a diverse spectrum of people who work across your business, but not just at more junior levels. Because that's obviously great and all, but actually you need people, and like so many of us say this all the time, but you need more people who are in more decision-making positions, because actually it brings a breadth of thought, and it brings a difference to the table that we can converse about. And not to say that Sean McGurr is not talented. I mean, yet to be seen, in my opinion. Actually, can we cut that? And I say that in the sense that actually, yes, he's proved himself perhaps in previous roles, like at J.W. Anderson. He's only done one collection of the Queen. And many people weren't bowled away or bowled over by it. That's not to say that it might not come through, but the reality is, why do we continue to appoint the same types of person into particular positions? Why do we continue to perpetuate this homogenous industry? The fact that Claire Wade Keller was the only female designer left within the roster at Caryn across their creative directors is crap. Like, and when I look across all of the other positions, like Maximilian being at Ferragamo, great, but actually the moment that he has a bad sales season, will probably be gotten rid of. And again, the problem for me is like how many people from the LGBT community who are operating in a luxury space are also, helming brands of their own names. Like, we're not necessarily progressing. We're sometimes held back. And again, it's not just about ethnicity, but it's about all of those different pillars across diversity. Sorry, what was your next question?
No, that was actually the question, so I was going to move it on to you. So you've answered that perfectly, thank you. Then we'll just bring that over to Caryn now. You mentioned the length of time you've been working within the fashion industry. You showed a closed show live in Birmingham, and that was kind of aimed at a lot of university students and young people who visited when it was showing in Birmingham. With your experience, what would you say, or what advice would you give to young emerging designers who want to create fashion and start their own brands, specifically to those who want to create brands or fashion designs and garments that celebrate sexuality and gender?
Okay, so I put in I suppose my bottom line would unpick your conditioning. Because before you can create, you have to acknowledge that you were created by a dominant culture that has shaped your thinking. So when you were sort of asking me, Daniel, about what designers would I put forward, I feel somewhat frustrated that while we might be talking about a kind of new fluid optics for clothing, we're still dealing with very much dominant culture, male gaze. We're also dealing with white gaze. So I put two pictures in to showcase those. So these are more extreme examples to maybe make a point. But this is something that you would see all the time, and it would just go past you. By the way, the brain sees in under 1/10 of a second, and we are exposed to between 2,000 and 5,000 images per week. And we simply don't have the battery power to unpick what we're seeing. But what we are seeing and what we're showing our young to a certain extent, we're on repeat, is heteronormative, cisgender, able-bodied, patriarchal posturing. And so to a certain extent, even though we might be getting some contemporary thinking in design and aesthetics, to your point, Daniel, quite often the team is still kind of top-heavy with dominant culture ideas. So when we look at that and we say, well, how do we unpack that to ourselves? How do we explain it to ourselves? I'm just going to pick out two pictures here to discuss. No, come back, you naughty people. No, now look, I've just revealed all my pictures now.
Nobody look.
So I don't know why they won't go back. That's really annoying. Gosh, hold on, let's just, no. Can someone help me? There it is. Let's see if I can make it slideshow. Slideshow, play from current slide. There we go. Still not very big though, is it?
Oh, it's big up there. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's just look at these two images as extremes. So we're looking at, both instances are male gaze, where we have the authentic selfhood of the sort of culture male who's centralised in the picture. He has a story, he's going somewhere, he's come from somewhere, he's in a successful space, he's projecting confidence, he's on a mission, he's fully dressed in aspirational clothing, and he's surrounded by people just like him, white gaze, and when we just look, there's an objectified body, as in it doesn't belong to a human, but of a model of colour who's got by far the best jacket on, but he is marginalised in the space. That's mostly our normal if we are white. Aren't we unpacking that? So we're seeing this sort of, and this definition is selfhood. We all need to feel supported in our journey for wholehearted selfhood, which is the authenticity of active doing and being us, being confident to be our whole self, speaking to all of us, really emerging from a space in perhaps which we felt we had to contort, but experience and confidence allows us to stretch out and unpack. But if we look at what women get given on a regular basis, and that is the objectifying body, she has no story. She's not got any aim. She's not acting in an authentic way. Because when women have an expensive item of clothing on, they don't lie down and open their legs. They live their life. But so many situations we see women posturing in a sexual way, posturing in a compliant way. So the pictures we saw previously were women actually being pinned up against a wall or pinned down. I showed you a group of men standing around a woman who was being pinned down onto the ground, but it's possible that nobody recognised that as heroicising rape culture. But that's what fashion does. And so for us to think about how we're going to present our creative idea means we are not just thinking about business survival, which is and teamwork and collaboration, a whole skill in itself. We're not just thinking about our creative aesthetic, but we're also thinking about our responsibility to challenge dominant culture norms with every image we make and every message we put out. So I'm very excited to think that that might be something that's my space as visiting professor of diverse selfhood at Kingston School of Art. Those are the conversations that I stimulate with my young creatives. It's a given that there's a technical skill and a design drive. It's a given maybe that there's a desire to create a sustainable business. But is it a given that you've actually unpacked your own dominant culture positioning, the internalised sexism, the internalised misogyny, the internalised racism? Because yes, women do internalise misogyny and they do act it out on other women. And I know from speaking to friends and colleagues of colour that yes, there is internalised racism, and it's something that we all have to unpack in order to go forward to create these teams where we're actually looking at everybody's contribution and bringing in as many different diverse opinions as possible. The question one can say at these points, and has been said when there's been racist imagery, was there not one person in the team who said, if we look at this Yves Saint Laurent picture of the woman with her legs open in shoes she'll never be able to actually get up in independently, high heels with wheels on, in a garment she would have never chosen to wear to walk out somewhere because she's only half dressed. Was there not a voice that said, what kind of shit photograph is that to show women? And why does anyone think that that's even vaguely inspiring? And what is it that you're really saying? Oh, she's vulnerable, she's alone, and she is suggesting somehow that you could overpower her because she's already down and she can't get up. That's the real message. So making those challenges within our own thinking is one of the places that we can start.
Thank you, Caryn. There's a lot to kind of think about and unpack there with that response. That's given me a lot of food for thought. Just kind of going back to some of the topics that you were talking about there, we can see some, high-profile brands that are projecting these images surrounding the topics that you've discussed. They're doing this, I'm assuming, knowing that they're going to get consumers to buy into that brand with some of the images that they're showing. What can consumers do to advocate and play a role in supporting the diversification of kind of getting rid of some of this that's happening within the fashion industry?
Oh, thank you, Gavin, because that question isn't in there, is it?
It is.
So key things, now that we can all self-publish, we can all immediately connect with the brand. We can be as vocal as we like about their antiquated, misogynistic, racist marketing campaigns. But we can also go straight to the Advertising Standards Authority. It only takes one complaint for them to have to review what they have been, what they've been shown, so that they have an opinion on it, because they can expect other complaints. I engaged with the ASA many years ago on the Beachbody Ready campaign, which, as all women know, was much hated. It got so much graffiti of an objectified woman whose body was standing to attention to be evaluated. Am I good enough? Am I beach ready? Is my body good enough? Please tell me, because I've got no idea, but that's really all that matters. And also dietary product ladies that you can have. So I engaged with them and said, well, how many complaints have you had? They'd had 468. And I said, and what's your finding on this? Because you've not taken it down. And they said, well, it conforms to accepted standards. And in my email, I said, and whose bullshit accepted standards are those? And what actually happened, because lots of women had gone in for it, it triggered a massive overhaul on representation, in which was represented by Jess Phillips at Houses of Parliament, that advertising would in future take into account the opinions of those represented. So when women are represented in such a way, people of colour are represented in such a way, any marginalised community feels that they have not been seen or represented, one call to the ASA, and I think you have to do it online now, begins a conversation for them to have to justify that ad.
Thank you, Caryn. I'm just conscious of time now, so I'll probably get the opportunity to ask one more question to each of you. I'm going to ask this question to you, Daniel Lismore. In terms of your own experience of what you know of the fashion and retail industries, how can fashion retailers and brands create more of an exclusive and accessible shopping experience for diverse gender identities and expressions?
If you want to base it on my own experience, I avoid going into any of those stores. I don't want to go into them at all, not for any reason. Just because I'm like, what am I doing in here? Also, I don't find anything interesting. This is just my own experience. And then I'm like, okay, well, if I do, like, if there is a situation, it's like, what could fit me? What would look good on me? Nothing. What would, like, literally, I just go in, when I go shopping with my friends, and they go to Southbiz or wherever, or, I'll spend a day with someone, and they go shopping, and I'm just like, this is hell. This is awful. Like, I don't want to be here, I want to go home. So that's just my own experience. I'd rather find a load of old fabric and just rip it up and stick a crown on my head, run out the door.
Perfect.
But that's just my own thing, and I know not everyone feels like they can do that, but anyone can if they really want to. I think you choose to be yourself, and you choose to represent yourself however you are or you want to be, and it's a choice at the end of the day. You can walk out of your house and go, okay, I want to feel like myself today, or do you go out and say, I don't want to be myself today? and I can easily do that. And I do actually own a hoodie and a pair of jogging bottoms, and I look like Vicky Pollard. And it's so I know there's going to be a reaction anyway, and whatever I wear, my hair's down to past my like my waist. I just go in these stores and I'm just like, I want to leave.
So what would make you want to go into them? Because you kind of touched on size and you can't find anything in terms of your size, and also it sounds like there's a lack of inspiration there as well. So if that changed, would you want to shop, or is there something more to it than that?
It's just me. It's just my own personal thing. I'm like, there's nothing that's going to get me in those stores. I mean, the Alexander McQueen store is quite amazing. You see all that embroidery on the window of Bond Street. There's an exhibition upstairs. You might go around, you might go, oh, that's nice. But that's it, really. Like, that's just my own thing. I like making things.
Thank you. So moving on to Daniel Peters. Yeah, I've had to really think. We've got two Daniels, one Darren. So I'm thinking hard up here. So Daniel Peters. I'm going to talk a little bit. I want you to respond to this because I know you've established a relationship with Manchester Fashion Institute, talking about D&I. What do you think fashion education institutions can do to integrate authentic discussions around sexuality and gender, particularly to embed them fully into their curriculums? So not as just kind of like a tick box exercise. How can we really integrate these conversations in depth into the curriculum for students?
I guess it's about the diversity of the people that you bring in for guest speaking opportunities, because I guess the reality is they bring in a different lived experience and perspective, and you never know what that might spark within somebody to explore about their own identity or about somebody else's identity who they know, who comes from the LGBT community or whatever it might be. So I think it's always about how do we bring in knowledgeable, experienced people. I think it's also about putting the budget behind it, if I'm honest, as well, because I think quite often we don't always place enough value on people who come from minority communities and pay people fairly and equitably. So I think it's those different things. Bring in the right people, pay them fairly and equitably, and make sure you've got a broad spectrum of people who can come in to speak from a place of lived experience. And as I've touched on throughout this, it's about making sure that you bring in the trans person who may have a disability. It's about bringing in X and Y, but I think it's also looking at different designers like Sinead O'Dwyer. If you don't know Sinead O'Dwyer, she's an incredible Irish designer who is herself a lesbian, but then designs for people who are plus size and she has people with disabilities there on the runway. So I think it's like, look around, be broader in who we're bringing in that sense.
Thank you. Darren, I'd like to ask you the same or similar question. What needs to happen, particularly from your experiences as a black, queer, gay man? What would you like to see happen within fashion education, particularly within higher education, within the curriculum, to ensure that people are educated about the lived experiences of black and queer people?
I wouldn't just say for black, queer people, because the best designers, the best artists, they have an overview and a compassion and a care and an empathy about the human spirit and about struggle. So I think it's just about it's all the things that Daniel said, getting people in, but paying them. But also, I find, not to be wanky, but art's really interesting when it's like, what does it sound like when a scientist comes into that space, or a psychologist, or an architect, or a dancer, and their experience of fashion and what they can do. Like, we've got the 7 students working with us from people with very, very different backgrounds and experience. That's when the exciting stuff happens, is when you bring those two different worlds together. Because representation is great, but I've always been challenged when it is the opposite to me, because they bring me something new and something fresh and something challenging. So as many diverse voices as possible, and not from necessarily your industry. And you generally find that we all have a lived human experience which then connects us, but then it may send you off into somewhere. And it's like people do like these boxes, and it's like fashion in 2020 for is very different. If you look like what Rihanna's doing with like Savage Invented, it's like she's reinvented a whole new kind of like cult of like diversity and who can be seen, what can be seen, what voices and what stories can be told. So I think it is about storytelling and just exposing those students to as many different voices that they can get, and not necessarily from the industry. Because we was talking about, and I was talking about the dance industry and the modelling industry, and we were talking about the exploitation and the casting calls, and there is lots of shared kind of like experiences. And it's like, if you're marketing at Google, how can that affect your marketing in a fashion industry? So I just think it's getting those broad, diverse voices around the table.
Yeah. Thanks. Last question, which I'm going to end with Caryn. And everyone else can follow on from this if you like. Just to Caryn, looking ahead, what changes or advancements would you like to see in the fashion industry regarding its approach to sexuality and gender diversity?
I mean, I think a lot has already been said in terms of opening the door and recognising that there is a we all gain, we all learn, we all grow, and we all become more culturally competent. We all become more fluid in our understanding of how the world works. So for what we currently have on a lot of institutional websites is we are diverse, we have these targets, but the higher up you go, the less diversity you see. Certainly, there is, in fashion, there are quite key studies to show that we need to see people like us in order to make a bond through shared characteristics, in order to show an increased intention to certainly purchase. But one could just translate that a little bit and say, to engage. And so for me, the importance is every single human being in the building recognising. I'll just go to my little slides, because otherwise we won't. That actually, the more diverse our teams are, the more kind of beautiful, brightly coloured, effective, energetic, curious they can be. And obviously research backs that up in terms of financial efficacy, but also creativity and productivity, as Daniel knows. And even that we have yet to recognise new markets. So quite rightly, many parents are not wanting a gender reveal. They're wanting to bring up their infant children without being burdened with having to contort to two very binary kind of dismantling spaces. So who is out there? Every one of us living our own authentic voice and saying, I often encourage my students to say, do you know what? That doesn't feel right to me. I don't understand it, and I feel this. I want to work in this way or say this. I just want to put this point forward. And having the courage to do that, meaning that we do, to a certain extent, kind of move aside the current dominant culture that is can be so oppressive in so many ways. It starts with a voice, and then you were talking about Black Pride, Darren, and then other voices join, and other humans are attracted because of the energy and the beauty and the excitement. And to me, that's where fashion and its wonderful aesthetic can so excite everyone.
Thank you. Excellent closing comment there. We're going to open up to the audience now. I can see we've got a hand up there already. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
Hello, thank you everyone. That was a really interesting panel, gave me lots to reflect on. One of the things I was thinking about in terms of my own identity, I'm a cis-het black woman, and there have been a couple of kind of big pop culture moments around sort of sexuality and fashion. So I'm thinking in my lifetime, like David Beckham wearing the sarong, which seemed at the time to be this big, wild moment, but then did not subsequently lead to lots of heterosexual white men thinking that they could wear, not gender clothing. It was a bit more reactive. And then I also think about the sort of Billy Porter eating it in that black Oscars gown, and that felt like a much better moment. But again, I don't feel like society's still got to that point where we have these really great sort of non-gendered clothing that more tend towards the feminine, that are mass marketed to across the gender spectrum, but to men as well. And I suppose it's a very meandering way of asking the question, what would it take for the fashion industry to kind of seriously consider things like that? And also, what does the fashion industry have against dresses with pockets? So I feel like if dresses and skirts with pockets were available to the wide spectrum of people because of their functionality and your ability to whip out your phone if you are in danger, these kinds of things like functional pockets in clothing, I just feel like that feels like it should not be a new thing that I'm asking for from fashion, and yet again it feels sort of gendered that I don't have.
Who would like to respond?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. Certainly what I have learnt about the fashion industry as an animal, as a machine, is it doesn't take risks, because at the end of the day, it is all down to counting the coins and ticking all the boxes. And so no CEO wants to be the CEO that kind of really steps out. They almost need, they are a barometer. So they quite often, we've seen it in the streets, we've seen it in minoritized communities, where they swoop in and then big it up on the catwalk and do it in such a way that obviously it has a mainstream spread. The thing about pockets, it's just rank stupidity that they are still creating garments that quite often are about silhouette, aren't they? They're about working with the body to say something that's quite dynamic. So you'll never get pockets on the catwalk, but you always, you can find pockets when you're shopping around, if that's your priority. As opposed to, you might have to lose out on dynamic cut, but pockets. But what I would say about the catwalk, and someone once said it to me, and I just thought, you know what, you're so right. They said, honestly, I don't rate the catwalk at all. Nobody runs for a bus, nobody sits down, nobody does normal things in these clothes, so why do we all look at it in the way that we do? And of course it is because it's a piece of advertising. It's a gallery moment for that designer to say, this is my art. And then the buyers come in and go, well, we'd like that, but we'd like it a lot longer, and can you give us some pockets? And we don't want so much fabric in it because that's going to cost a fortune. So the machine behind, to a certain extent, is certainly having to recognise that so many of us are walking away from petrochemicals. We don't want fibre mixes because they don't break down, so we'd rather invest in crafts and wovens, fabrics, because we know that they decompose or break down more effectively, and sort of fashion groups are having to take that on board and recognise that we as a kind of mass-directed, purpose-led consumer do have huge power. So get Instagramming about lack of pockets. I bet you will get hundreds of followers immediately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I found it really interesting listening to everything that's been discussed today, including how you were talking about kind of challenging the kind of the norms that are out there, the kind of dominant culture, and how, say, if somebody's walking down the street looks different, they could face resentment because people have seen that they're kind of liberated in a way that they can't accept themselves or outside of that norm. As a designer setting up a brand for relatively new for the first time, and who designs from the kind of queer aesthetic, I want to be able to design clothes for everybody, but I find a lot of interest in what I put out there up until the point where my voice kind of talks about my own experience, and then it becomes really divisive. I was wondering if you had any kind of advice for me as I kind of grow and move forward, of how to kind of embrace and welcome people of all different experiences into my brand.
I think, yeah. I'll kind of do a brief comment. Why do you think, if they're not buying into your experience and your brand, what you're designing in your voice, why would you want them to do that anyway?
Yeah.
Do you need to? Is the question I'll put back to you.
I think you may well be right.
Well, I'll hand it over to.
I know, definitely considering that. I think just because I'm so small at the moment, I kind of perhaps wrongly get a slight fear about that. The reach of my brand kind of being stifled, I suppose. And I just think it'd be nice if we could all be more open to wearing things which aren't dictated by time, that's really limiting for people.
Do you mean stifled in the sense that some people are going to look at it and be turned off because it particularly speaks to a particular demographic?
Yeah.
How would you describe your aesthetic?
My aesthetic is very. Hello. I'd say my aesthetic very much focuses on dismantling kind of binary, really, and being much more kind of liberal and freeing for anybody who wants to wear clothes outside of the traditional masculine, feminine. So what I've noticed is that my kind of growth and following goes really up, but then when I kind of talk a bit more openly, it definitely takes a step backward each time. And maybe I should just be thankful that's sort of the week from the chaff in a way, you know. But I'm unsure, and it probably nerves me a little bit, I guess.
I think from a marketing perspective, there's probably still some curation to be done around that conversation, because I think really ultimately it's about how do you start to connect with the people, as we're saying here, who are the community. How do you grow and foster and nurture that community, and then continue to build on top of it? I think start with the people who really authentically care about what it is that you're doing. I think that you can then start to layer more conversation, other types of product perhaps that can speak to a particularly broader reaching audience. But think about the core. Start with the foundational element. Speak to the people who are really truly buying in and investing in what you're doing, because they're the ones who will ultimately celebrate it and continue to translate that message to other people. I think, it's got to start from that authentic perspective, and hopefully will then grow. But also, one thing I say to everybody is kind of find a mentor. I think it's deeply, and I say that as somebody who runs mentoring programs for different purposes. But I think do you have a mentor?
No.
No. So find a mentor, because I think a mentor is somebody who can help you to unpack some of those problems and those instances, and can look at actually what is the tone of voice that you're using when you're talking about these things that you assume put some people off. Because I think ultimately that person will help you to shape the narrative, the direction, and look at the trajectory and the growth in that perspective. Happy to have a chat afterwards, and I might have somebody in my network potentially.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I think you should do you and stop being scared, and that's just like, if you look at all the other designers when they're bold and they're out there, that's the key to. It's like you should look up a book called The Purple Cow. It's like a business thing. I've just read it and I'm just like, oh, okay. So look up that and just don't be fearless. And what you're talking about, this you're scared of, and you're I think you should put that out and say, hey, and people will go, oh, why are we not looking at this?
Thank you for being frank.
I've got a really quick one, which is for everyone in thinking about the same thing, and speaks to you as well. I think we are shown unreasonable definitions of success in our media. So you look at any kitchen scene, advertising washing up liquid, an ordinary family, they've got a massive, extravagant, white and silver kitchen. It's exactly the same when it comes to a perceived idea of what success is. And so, to a certain extent, being able to do what you do, being able to grow organically, being able to be your authentic self, that's success in itself, without this kind of perhaps expected trajectory of moving into a bigger space. And in actual fact, being able to pay your bills, which you may be not at yet, but that is ultimately the top level of success, because we're all given this idea that, no, it's about being highly desirable and real extreme likability. Everyone wants to be your friends, and you're at all these parties, and you've got these very glamorous shops or clients. I don't know a designer who hasn't had a lot of stress when they've got to that space. And that's one of the things you want to do, is manage your life and your growth and your stress levels so that you enjoy what you do, you can pay your bills, and you can learn and grow and enjoy life, but you're not in a space where you're holding on to a business that you're trying to pull in more and more investment in, which brings its own problems. So I'm not saying don't aim for the stars, I'm just saying don't give yourself some kind of hard time because you're engaging in unhealthy social comparison with everybody else who's supposedly got a great business. If you're making stuff and selling it and people love it and you're getting that sort of feedback, it's a great business.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Any more questions to talk here?
So LGBTQ-wise, I don't know much about, but I just want to talk about the difference between sort of menswear and women's wear in society, also in education. So there's a lot like universities talking into fashion. They sort of split students into two distinct separations in women's wear or menswear. And like in society-wise, like if I go out in Zara or H&M, they've got like a really distinct in floor-wise, like menswear and women's wear. Like if I'm a girl and I want a really good fabric and white shirt that's not so transparent, I feel a bit shy to go to the menswear like part to find a shirt that's not so transparent. So education-wise, what do you think? Like, do they have to have like a sort of pathway for special groups, or they sort of shouldn't split them into very distinctive sexual or gender, would you say?
It's a very quick one. You're going to lead that in what you choose to do with your research and your development and the way that you approach your own practice. So it's not a case of waiting for an institution or someone else to open the door. You're going to walk through the door and do it the way that you believe it should be done.
I guess the problem is any business is thinking about commerciality, and actually how does a customer enter a store, be able to find the thing that they need really easily, be able to walk out with products. And I understand your problem, and I think it's kind of like Topshop used to do that to some extent really well when it came to Topshop Oxford Circus, where they had the petite section, they had the tall section, they had the maternity section, so that actually people could find the product with ease. I think when it comes to gendered products, I think we're starting to see it merchandised differently online, but I think in store is so different because we're so limited to the floor space that we have within retail. That's not me trying to make excuses for a Selfridges or a H&M, but perhaps there is a need for, depending on the type of store size that people have, that maybe on the ground floor is a more inclusive offer and edit. But again, brands aren't exactly thinking about that, is the problem. They think about, they come in, see what you want, buy it, get out, come back. Instead of thinking, actually, how can we make this experience more inclusive? I think they think about it from a disability perspective, for instance, the height of a rail, how do mannequins look and stuff like that. But I think the gendered piece is the next part of it that will take a hell of a lot to kind of change and unlock. But as well, I think it's about training your designers that come into your business about inclusivity and equity and diversity as much as we're teaching students. Because I think actually there's a lot of the old guard within industry who design in particular ways. And actually we can be so set in our ways in how we do things. Why do we need to change? But that in itself is part of the problem. That sometimes there is such a big resistance from inside the industry, and that's not just the people who make the decisions, but it's the people who have to do all of the work as well. That doesn't really answer anything, sorry. But
it's a big question.
yeah, but I think it's one of those big hurdles that needs to be approached. And actually for a store like Selfridges, you know, they've got the opportunity to create more zones within their stores where actually more people feel comfortable to be able to shop and edit of different types of products. So I'll mention it to some people. I'll see if anything sticks. Can't promise anything.
Yeah, I've got to thank you for that. I think we've got time for one more question if there's anyone else that wants to ask anything. No? No more questions? No?
I mean, we're hanging.
Going. Okay, so we'll close now. There's about 20 minutes or so for a bit of networking and catching up if you wanted to ask any questions to any of the panelists now. But I'll just close by saying thank you so much to Manchester Art Gallery for having us and giving us this space. Thank you so much to all of the panelists for giving us your time and your expertise and your responses and answers. And thank you to Manchester Fashion Institute as well for supporting the event, and thank you again to all of you for spending the last couple of hours with us as well. So thank you all. There'll be 20 minutes or so before we get chucked out, so thank you.